All right, well, it's a few minutes past the hour, so we can get going. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for PA Lyme Resource Network's Virtual Lyme Impact Series. This is where we bring you top experts who are sharing their immense knowledge and discussing the most crucial things that you need to know. We are so pleased to have Cassandra Haddad joining us tonight for this February session, SOT Therapy. Before I hand it over to her, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm 𝗦𝗢𝗍. I'm the program manager for PA Lyme's Dare to Be Tick Aware program. I'm the founder of the Delco Lyme Support Group and regional leader for the Delaware County region. If you don't know about our tick education prevention program, I encourage you to click over to palyme.org and click on Dare to Be Tick Aware, where you can learn all about the seminars and the webinars that we offer. And we also have downloadable free prevention materials. Tonight, joining me also is 𝗦𝗢𝗧. He is PA Lyme's Director of IT, the regional leader for the Pittsburgh region and the Pittsburgh Lyme Disease Support Group. He's going to help me facilitate this. Just some quick housekeeping. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A and the chat. We'll look at them in both places. And if you are watching on Facebook Live, you can put your questions in the comments sections. And we're going to address all of those questions at the end. So for tonight's SOT therapy talk, again, we are so pleased to have Cassandra with us. She is a family nurse practitioner at 𝗦𝗢𝗄 Health and Wellness, which is located in Mechanicsburg, PA. So Cassandra, I'm going to send this over to you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much for the warm introduction, and I'm really excited to be here tonight. SOT therapy is something that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm really excited to be offering it in Central Pennsylvania. And I'm excited tonight to just give some really good factual information, and I hope there's a lot of questions because there's a lot of misinformation and some good information out there as well. So this is a great time to get your questions answered, find out kind of what the real deal is. So thank you to all of our attendees for taking time out of your busy schedules to spend some time with me tonight. I really look forward to your questions, and they'll share my contact information with you. So please feel free to reach out if anything comes up afterwards as well. So let me resume sharing my screen here. And I'm Cassandra Haddad, as we said, and I borrowed this intro slide here from our company's website. As Amy said, I'm a family nurse practitioner, and I've officially spent over half of my life in healthcare now. So yes, I started when I was like 10. No, but anyway, I transitioned to functional medicine about 3 years ago, mainly because I was becoming increasingly frustrated with the current approach to healthcare in the large hospital systems. And this was pre-COVID. So even then I could see that the system just wasn't working like I thought that it could. One of my big regrets when I first came to functional medicine is looking back, I probably missed a lot of Lyme and definitely a lot of co-infections. It's not something we ever really learned about in school or covered, and certainly mainstream traditional family practice, unless I had like a positive Western blot, I just didn't really know anything. So now that I know more, I certainly, wish I could go back and change the past, but now I can certainly help educate others and get people the care that they need. When I'm not working or teaching the next generation of nurse practitioners, I'm with my twins or out in the garden. And I work at 𝗦𝗢𝗄 Health and Wellness Center, and I try and merge the best of allopathic or traditional medicine with integrative medicine and approach my family practice from that perspective. Additionally, I'm a director of clinical operations. So that's a really fancy way to say I get to bring on fun new therapies and help implement them. One of those was SOT just under 2 years ago now. So this is part of our team at 𝗦𝗢𝗄 Health. We say we believe you deserve better health. We're a functional medicine practice. We use a collaborative care team approach, meaning I'll work with chiropractors, traditional Chinese medicine, holistic psychology, nutrition, just to really take a nice holistic view of your healthcare. And we have offices now in Mechanicsburg and Mannheim, Pennsylvania. Our latest edition is in Gordonville, which is kind of out in the heart of Amish country. And in the next year, expect to see 1 to 2 more practices open. So we're really excited about that. But tonight we're here to talk about SOT therapy. So let's first start by talking about what is it? I call it SOT. A lot of people call it SOT. Either one is fine. And tonight, what I'm going to talk about is SOT in relation to infections, but not related to cancer, because that's really a whole different presentation. SOT, we say because the real meaning is a mouthful. So it's supportive 𝗦𝗧 technique. So say that 3 times fast. And basically what the oligonucleotide stands for is short DNA or RNA molecules. So you may hear this called sense and antisense, where the sense would be the Lyme chemical messenger for reproducing itself or replication, and the antisense would be the messenger that stops that. It's also referred to by some as lock and key or mRNA. To me, SOT is the future of medicine. My family has been in trials in this country for SOT for a different disease process. So like I said, it's near and dear to my heart for that reason as well. I think it's truly customized medicine because it's individualized to you and to no one else. So where does this magic SOT come from? There's only one company in the world that I know of that offers that, and that would be RGCC. So I have their website up there for you. There's at last count over 400 providers in this country offering SOT. And the company has been going through a period of rapid growth and a lot of improvements. So I think that number is only going to continue to grow. Also, the community is really catching on to SOT. It's a hot topic and a lot of people are looking for it. This company offers a lot of really amazing cancer tests and treatments outside of SOT. But I'm not going to get into those tonight because, again, that's just a whole huge other presentation. There's 2 other tests specific to Lyme and co-infections that they do offer, called the Prime Spot and the PALDI Spot, which is PALDI Spot. I've only ever ordered those tests once in the almost 2 years that we've been doing it, and there's a bunch of reasons why we don't really use those tests at our office. One of the biggest ones being the cost. It is not an inexpensive test, although anymore there's very few Lyme tests that are inexpensive. And unfortunately, the community spends a lot of money, as you all know, on testing and treatment. So it's not that they're bad tests, it's just not the approach that our office tends to use. Certainly there are people out there who really love that test and use it all the time. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask them. So here's one of the big questions, and that's, how does this work? So I'm going to start off by showing you a short video. You may have seen this linked on our website or floating around the internet. Interestingly, this is from the company that originally developed the drug that my family was in a trial for, but sold that technology. But it kind of shows you about how SOT works on the cells in the body. So it's not specific to Lyme. You'll have to extrapolate that out to how it would work to stop Lyme replication in your body. It's about 3 minutes long, and I really think it's worth the watch so that we can kind of wrap our head around this moving forward. When we first started talking about bringing on this therapy, this is really what helped it to make sense in my head because I'm a visual learner. So let's click this link here. And I'll make it big. We're good?
𝗦𝗧 Pharmaceuticals is a leader in antisense technology. Antisense drugs work by stopping the production of disease-associated proteins in the body. To understand how antisense drugs work, you need first to understand how proteins are made. Your body is made up of billions and billions of cells. Each of your organs, your brain, heart, liver, kidneys, and so on, are comprised of specialised cells. Let's take a closer look at your liver. Using a microscope, we can see that it's made of lots of cells. Every cell has an information centre called a nucleus, seen here as the round structure. Inside the nucleus, you will find genes, which are made up of DNA. Your individual DNA is unique and makes you who you are. It contains the instructions for making all the proteins in your body. Proteins are the crucial building blocks for the structure and function of all our body organs and systems. However, the most common cause of diseases are overproduction of specific proteins or production of a bad protein. The process of making a protein, good or bad, begins with the cell making a copy of DNA. This single-strand copy of DNA is called messenger RNA or mRNA. The messenger RNA travels outside the nucleus to the part of the cell where proteins are made. Proteins are then assembled based on the instructions carried by the messenger RNA from the DNA. For this reason, messenger RNA is the target of antisense drugs. After injection, the antisense drug moves to your bloodstream and travels throughout your body to reach your cells. Inside each cell, the drug binds to the targeted messenger RNA that is responsible for making the disease-causing protein. The binding process causes the messenger RNA to be broken down. This prevents the production of the disease-causing protein. Each antisense drug is different and targets only one messenger RNA. Antisense drugs only interact with targeted messenger RNA and do not interact with DNA or alter your genes in any way.
All right. Oh, good. We're right where we left off. All right. So I just think that was such a beautifully illustrative video, kind of.
Hello, Discover Card here to explain our cashback match.
We don't need commercials. Okay, sorry about that. So I just thought that was a beautifully illustrative video that really kind of shows what's happening on that teeny tiny microscopic level. That's always hard for me to wrap my head around. So in the case with Lyme, though, instead of targeting mRNA in your body cells, it would be targeting the protein that tells the Lyme to reproduce. So in summary, you pick a target such as Lyme. They actually manufacture the messenger to stop the replication. They make a whole lot of copies of that, and then they ship it back to us and we give it through an IV. So in theory, as soon as you get that SOT through the IV, the generation of Lyme that was just getting ready to reproduce, they're at the end of their life cycle, should kind of be what we call chemically neutered, and it shouldn't be able to reproduce. And then the next generation that was just getting ready to reproduce should be stopped, and so on and so forth, until you kind of hit that 80-day mark, which is about the life cycle of Lyme. The SOT molecule is small enough to pass the blood-brain barrier, and I encourage the use of biofilm disruptors to try and pull everything out of hiding when you're doing what I call going in for the kill, right? So I try and get every last possible piece of Lyme kind of pulled out of those biofilms, which can be tricky sometimes because when you do biofilm disruption, some people get really sick from that in and of itself. But I like to kind of push the biodisruption as much as I can. What do I use for biofilm disruptors? If someone's super sensitive, I'll use something super mild like stevia. I like one called Biodisrupt. There's a whole bunch of different choices that you can use. Even NAC or NAC, some people call it, there's a little bit of a biofilm disruptor. But whoever your provider is probably has a protocol of supplements that they like to do with the SOT therapy. So that's really individualized, but I just thought I'd throw a few out since I was talking about it. Additionally, a lot of patients seem to increase their chances of success when they add on some type of support for mold and or parasites. What I always have to say about parasites is, I don't know if we're really infested with parasites or not. I've seen a lot of information both ways, and people like to show me pictures of their parasites as well, and that's pretty hard to argue with. But a lot of medications work in more than one way. That's a lot of times why people feel better on antibiotics, is they have a lot of anti-inflammatory properties as well, particularly like doxycycline. That's one of the ways it works for acne, is it does help with bacteria, but it is anti-inflammatory. So whether we're killing parasites or those anti-parasitic drugs or supplements have another mechanism of action that helps it work, I'm not 100% sure, but targeting those three areas, Lyme, mold, and parasites, seems to have some type of synergistic component, meaning they help each other work well. I do find sometimes in the alternative world, there's camps of people, and they're like just the mold camp or the Epstein-Barr camp or the Lyme camp. But the truth is we're really, really complex beings, and we have to look at you as a whole. We can't just single out Lyme and ignore everything else in your life, because no one's going to be successful that way. But back to the SOT, it's said to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from the very second that you get it, probably for about 6 months. So what I was told in my training from RGCC was it works for probably full speed for about 3 months. And after that, it probably tapers down a little bit, but is still therapeutic. And then after about 6 months, they did say there's some research that it's still working, but probably a little bit more at like a sub-therapeutic dose, but still there behind the scenes. So I think that sounds great. One of my other favorite things about SOT is it's not depending on your immune system to do anything. It's not depending on your liver to metabolize it or your kidneys like a drug, which is really great for a lot of our patients who are on a lot of medicines or have a lot of sensitivities or, you know, have some liver or renal issues. So there's definitely a lot of really cool reasons to use SOT. All right, currently available organisms. This is the latest list that I have. It was last updated in 2021. They're always trying to add more organisms. And even in the short time, you know, almost 2 years now that we've been performing this therapy, there's been at least 2 updates that I can think of off the top of my head. So 18 different strains of Borrelia, which is pretty significant. We have 5 Bartonella and 5 Babesias. I really like Vibrant a lot. I love their Lyme 2.0 test. What I don't love is they just increased their prices by 20%. So it used to be like $750 for the complete panel is now, I think, $935, which is really hitting kind of a painful point. But every time I run that test, they add more strains too. So everything that you can test for out there cannot be treated with SOT. There's many strains out there that they just don't have an SOT for yet, but I'm always impressed with the list that they do have. There's also a whole viral panel. So I listed some of the ones that my patients look for on your slide there. HSV 1 and 2, HHV 6, CMV, and EBV. So those are often opportunistic infections that we see. But it's really amazing the other viruses they have. So they also have Coxsackie, HPV 16, 18, and 611, hepatitis B and C, HIV, and something called HTLV1. So it's just fascinating to me, all the targets that they have. And what I usually recommend is starting with 1. So this is super controversial, very patient specific, and very provider specific. You can only get 1 strain at a time. Recommendation from RGCC is every 6 weeks. Now, I know this isn't what's done everywhere, and I do have one family who was very insistent that they wanted to do it every 2 weeks, and they're actually doing okay. But I've certainly heard some bad stories about people trying to do multiple organisms very quickly, because what you got to remember is you're going to start to overlap the periods of die-off, right? So every organism has a different life cycle. So if you start with like Lyme, which is 80 days, and then you start adding on some of the co-infections with shorter life cycles, you can kind of end up peaking everything at the same time. So that's my caution with doing them very, very quickly. My understanding is that you may not do them sooner than 2 weeks, and that's certainly what I practice as well. So my preference is 6 weeks between treatments and organisms. When you make an SOT, it only has 1 target. So if you're going after 𝗦𝗢𝗧 and you also have, 𝗦𝗢𝗧 𝗵𝗲𝗃𝗀𝗃, that 𝗦𝗢𝗧 SOT isn't going to hit the 𝗻𝗍𝗂 at all. Even if you have one 𝗻𝗍𝗂 SOT, it's not going to hit any other versions of 𝗻𝗍𝗂 because it's so specific with its sense and antisense. I wish at this price point, it would whack out all the organisms at one time, like a great whack-a-mole, just kind of bonk them all in the head, but it just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. There's also been a lot of talk recently about someone starts with a Lyme SOT and then they get really sick and test positive for a ton of co-infections all of a sudden when they never tested positive before. So I think that's pretty complex, but I think a really basic explanation is Lyme is such a big player with your immune system that it gets really distracted by the Lyme. And I think it kind of loses focus on everything else because most of the testing that we do, we're looking at antibodies. You'll hardly ever get a positive PCR, and even positive fishes are hard to get, right? Most of what we're doing is tracking antibodies. So we're depending on your immune system to do the right thing. And most of my patients, I don't really trust their immune system. So I don't think it's that you didn't have co-infections before and all of a sudden you get them. They were always there. And some people know that they had them and just couldn't get them to test positive. So, there's a lot of question about what order to do these in. And I would say, work with your provider and come up with a plan that makes sense for you. The training we got said to start with Lyme first. And if you kind of took out that big player, then maybe the immune system could pick up and take care of some of these co-infections. But I make it really patient specific. And if someone's really having a lot of BART symptoms and they want to tackle their BART first, and they've heard that, the co-infections get worse when you treat the Lyme, then by all means, I'm going to do that, right? Because this is a two-way street and you have to work together to come up with a treatment plan that's going to work for you and make sense for you. So those are the organisms that are available at this time. Let's talk a little bit about this process. So I can only speak to what my process is. It's a little bit different around the country depending on which office you go to. So that just reminds me that I did have a patient who went to another office because their prices were a little bit better. And she ended up calling me, asking me if I would take the treatments ordered by the other office, transfer them to my office and administer them because it didn't go so well. And unfortunately, that answer is no. So whatever office you choose to proceed with, make sure you're very comfortable, you have all your information up front, and that you're able to complete the treatment at that office. RGCC is very strict. You cannot transfer therapies between offices. They have a really complicated process for drawing for another office. So let's say you lived close to me, but you wanted to get your therapy in another state. You can do that. It's, like I said, pretty complicated. Most people draw at the same office that they're going to get the treatment from just because it's such an expensive therapy. And I don't really trust anybody else to draw my therapies, and another office would probably feel the same. So make sure you really like the office you're going to work with. And you have to have a diagnosed infection, meaning I know there's a lot of people out there who really know and have clinical symptoms, because this is a clinical diagnosis of Lyme or BART or 𝗻𝗍𝗂, and they cannot test positive. They've done antibiotic challenges. They ran around outside my building. They got a massage, right? They've tried everything and they still can't test positive. Unfortunately, we can't make a treatment unless we have a clear positive according to that lab standards. So whether you're talking about MDL or Vibrant or Genix or, Galaxy, or what's the new one, Red Labs with the phage testing in Belgium, no matter LabCorp, Quest, whatever lab system you're using, it has to be a clear positive. If it's a borderline positive, RGCC just won't take it and won't make a therapy at all. Alt criteria, so CDC or alt criteria positive is okay, just no borderlines. And I know there's a ton more labs than just the ones that I listed out there. The other thing is your test results cannot be any older than 6 months by the time your blood sample actually arrives in Greece, because we have to send the test results with it. So if you're coming up on like 4 months since your test results, you really want to get moving on this therapy. We all know Amazon Prime is not 2-day shipping anymore, right? They increase their prices, but their shipping takes forever because that's what's going on in the world right now. Shipping is crazy. So you just want to make sure you're giving yourself enough time, because it's really frustrating to get to that like 5.5-month mark and realize you got to spend another $1,000 on lab testing to even get this therapy. So pay attention to those times. And your provider should be looking at those as well. So again, I'm not going to speak about 𝗦𝗢𝗧 or 𝗦𝗢𝗧. I'm not going to talk about all their cool cancer testing. But 𝗦𝗢𝗧 or 𝗦𝗢𝗧 would also be tests that you could use. And you can actually send a 𝗦𝗢𝗧 over and have them make the SOT directly off the 𝗦𝗢𝗧 before you ever even get the results back. And if you're really looking to streamline your timeline, that's one of the easiest things to do. So for example, let's say you haven't had testing done for a while, you have to get a test. Then that's a couple of weeks for the test to come back. Then you got to come in for the appointment. Then we have to draw your blood and ship it to Greece. Then they have to ship it back to me. So it just adds a couple of weeks onto that time frame. But work with your provider, see what companies they're used to using, and keep an eye on those dates. So once you have positive test results, you're probably going to see me at my office. We also have Dr. Ross Marcagiani. He does consults in Mannheim. And then I cover the other offices. If you already see one of our other providers, or you're seeing another provider not at our office, I'm certainly happy to see you to discuss doing the SOT. Just give us a call. And we do have a fair amount of local providers who refer to us, just because it takes a lot to get this therapy up and running, but I'm sure you'll see more and more people doing it. I'm happy to co-manage with other providers and talk back and forth with them. All right, so we got your positive test results. You come in, you see me for the consult. I walk you through everything. I go back over what is SOT. We go through risks and benefits. And then, make sure all your testing is within the time frame. And then we draw your blood using a special kit from RGCC, following all of the rules and regulations, and we send it to Greece. I'm always trying to figure out how to fit myself in that box, because Greece sounds like a really nice place to visit, but I can't fit in there. So we ship it out. They actually manufacture your therapy. They say anywhere from like 14 to 21 days to manufacture it. It seems to be a little bit quicker turnaround lately, since they've been doing a lot of improvements, and they've been working on streamlining a lot of their portal and ordering systems. So that's kind of all the behind the scenes stuff, but the end result is that it's getting us a quicker therapy for our patients, and that's really important. So once we receive your therapy back in the office, which everyone's anxiously awaiting, we'll give you a call and we get you scheduled for your IV. So most offices, the training we get from RGCC is that we use 2 different medications. I call them pre-meds. So one is 𝗦𝗢𝗧, also known as Pepcid. Most of you have heard about Pepcid in reference to stomach acid. There is some rumblings about using it perhaps as an antiviral, but I'm not going to comment on that. But it's technically an H2 blocker, so it indirectly can work for allergic reactions. When I was an ER nurse, we used to give it for allergic reactions all the time. And then the other medication that's given is dexamethasone, which is a steroid. The 𝗦𝗢𝗧 or Pepcid is given as a pill. The dexamethasone is actually just a little tiny 4 milligrams, and it's given through an IV. Some of our folks are pretty scared to take steroids. There's some information out there that maybe you shouldn't have steroids with Lyme. But what I say is, what the steroids actually do is they get your immune system pretty calm for that injection, and they take your vein walls and they actually tighten them up a little bit. So what RGCC says is if you skip that dexamethasone, you could lose 5 to 15% of your SOT molecules as soon as you give it through the IV. And that's really sad, because you just paid big bucks for those little molecules. So I do like 15% times the price and figure out how much money just zipped out into your tissues. But I do have patients not want those medications every once in a while. They're very safe to give as those one-time doses with very minimal side effects. We talk about it kind of keeping your immune system in check while this treatment is administered. But truthfully, there's nothing to be allergic to. It is simply messenger RNA. So you can't really have an allergic reaction to that. The most common side effect reported during administration is a headache, but we've never, maybe one headache, maybe. But other than that, there's never been a reaction at our office, thank goodness. And hopefully there never will be. So once we give you those 2 medicines, we prep your SOT, push it through the IV. It's kind of anticlimactic after all the time and money and paperwork and getting the blood drawn. It's just bloop, there it is. So I always tell people like, hey, be prepared to be like, was that it? And then you sit there, let the rest of the IV saltwater saline go in. We keep an eye on you and make sure you do okay. And then we send you home. So the whole process is well under 2 hours. And then, at our office, I call people about 6 weeks later to talk about herxing, which we'll talk about in the next few slides here. And then I always say, about 3 to 4 months after your treatment, you want to get back together with your Lyme provider or co-infection provider and talk about what your plan looks like. You don't want to retest too early, right? Because we're usually chasing those antibodies and they can take months to fall. So I say not to retest between 4 to 6 months, but it's really hard to wait, right? Even if you're feeling better, people really want to see those numbers go down, but we have to give them time to go down. So I mentioned that phone call to remind people about a herx. Most of you have probably either experienced a herx or read about a herx. So that's short for Herxheimer. I love this little graphic I found with a sick looking little guy with all the little die-off stuff above him. I just thought this was a great little meme here. So just like any other therapy, you can herx with SOT and you can herx really bad. I kind of like people to herx just a little bit because that helps me know whether or not they're responding. Although I have people who don't herx at all and have responded. And I've had people who've had a terrible herx and still didn't make much improvement in the end. So it's just super individualized. But I always remind people at that 6-week call, hey, make sure you have all your good stuff on hand, whether you're doing trisalts or baking soda or Alka-Seltzer or turmeric or Epsom or glutathione, whatever you're doing for your usual herx reactions. And most providers have a little sort of supplements they like to do kind of pre and post, and they'll recommend a few things for herxing. So make sure you talk to your provider about, hey, what do I do if I herx? How long do I let it go before I call you? What are your recommendations that we should be doing? I mentioned earlier that headache is reported to be the most common side effect during the actual infusion itself. And then IV site reactions. So what I say in the office is anytime I poke a hole in your skin, I can cause bleeding, infection, scarring, or in the case of an IV, a blood clot even, or something called thrombophlebitis, meaning an irritated spot in the vein where it gets kind of like a red hot cord. And you can get that from just a regular IV even in the hospital. All right, so here's one of our first $1 million questions. Does it work? And I'm here to say, I don't know. I don't know if it works or not. It works for some people and not for others. And why that is, I don't know. I've had patients who've been sick for 20 years. They've spent $400,000. They're coming in for SOT and I think, oh my goodness, please let this work for them. I don't know how this is going to work. And it does. And then I have other people who were recently diagnosed that it doesn't work for. I've yet to find a rhyme or reason or a pattern to this. But for some people, it definitely does seem to work. All you have to do is hop on the Facebook SOT group and you'll see a lot of very strong and very different opinions about whether or not SOT works. I joined that group or one of the groups, but I don't do a lot on there and I actually don't read a lot too. I kind of wanted to know what was going on out in the Facebook world with SOT. But it's a pretty hot group. And I'm a relatively low maintenance person, so I kind of steer clear of a lot of confrontation. But you may find some good information on there. So like I said, the truth is no one really knows if this works or not. Some people say if you just take 14 days of doxycycline, you'll be fine. And you're cured and you'll never have trouble again. Most of you out here know that that probably wasn't the case for you at least, although I've seen that from time to time. There's other people that say you can never cure Lyme or a co-infection. You can only put it into remission. And again, I don't know if that's the truth or not either. I would say the longer that I'm in this, the less clear it gets to me, right? And the less black and white there is. It's a really whole lot of fuzzy, fuzzy gray. So until the mainstream medical community actually believes us, and believes our patients, and quit worrying about what to label them and just try and make them better, I think we're going to be stuck for a little while. I would love to see a huge double-blind placebo study on SOT. It's just not going to happen, right? Just like we have so many wonderful supplements, but that's never going to become mainstream because there's no company to make $1 bazillion off of it. So where does that leave us? Kind of in here in the middle, right? Just trying to do the best we can. You want to get better. I want to take good care of my patients. This is one more tool in our toolbox, right? So I've heard of treating Lyme 100 different ways: bee stings, special water, energetic water, royal rife, medications, supplements, fasting, dieting, just everything you could possibly think of. And like I said, sometimes it works for someone else, but not for you. Sometimes you have to have something from kind of column A and B and C and D. I talk about it like hacking, right? Just like you have to hack a computer, we have to hack every individualized person and see what works for them. If there was one person that had it all figured out, everybody would be going to that person. Some people claim like a 95% success rate with SOT. I think that's high. I was taught 80%, and that's probably what I would feel comfortable with quoting. Although I think it might be a little closer to about 50, honestly. So I'm very excited. I'm going to get a summer intern this year, and part of their job is going to be to crunch all of my SOT numbers. Someone has to kind of go back through the charts and through all the test results and see, one, did the test results get better? But most importantly, number two, did the patient get better? And that's going to be a lot of time. So stay tuned. I hope to have that information at the end of the summer. But I think we really need to individualize this with your provider. So what have you tried before? What can we do in conjunction with SOT? Or are we going to do SOT instead of other things? And then we have to look at you from a holistic perspective, right? So we have to kind of look at what you've done before and do anything we can to optimize your chance of success. Sometimes that means getting you into a healthier state before we go in for the kill. And I've had to do that a lot of times. Just spend 3 months rebuilding your health and then try and kill something off so that you can handle all that massive die-off and try and prevent a worsening herx. So that brings us to our second $1 million question, which is, how many do I need? I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the course of doing SOT is very few times is it one and done. It's a big financial commitment. No matter where you go, this is not an inexpensive therapy. And that reminds me, make sure wherever you go gives you in writing your upfront costs of what this is going to look like. Some offices piecemeal everything out and you end up paying $20 here and $30 there. So just make sure you have a good understanding of the cost before you go into it. But very few people seem to get one treatment for one organism and get back to 100%. I have seen it happen. And man, do I love when it does. It's phenomenal. But for some folks, it seems like they either have to do more than one treatment for the same organism, or they have to hit a couple different organisms. And oftentimes it's those co-infections that can be really stubborn to clear up. And Epstein-Barr also seems to be particularly stubborn. But I feel like Epstein-Barr is stubborn no matter what. So, like I said, it's just so individualized. My hope for everybody is one and done. But more and more I have people coming in and they're going ahead and ordering 2 and 3 at a time. I personally don't like to order more than 3 at a time. I really encourage people to order 1 and see how they do. We can always add a second one on as long as we're in that 6-month window. It's just such a big commitment. And it's easy for me to say it's a big financial commitment, but when you're the person who's sick and suffering, it's the time. And that's kind of what drives people to do 2 and 3 organisms ordered at the same time. How do you know it worked, right? So number one, at clinical diagnosis, how are you feeling? If you're feeling 100%, I don't know that I would go chasing down those antibodies with like a great vengeance, right? We love to repeat testing because we want to see those numbers move. But if you repeat testing too early, they might not move yet. So then you're feeling 100%, but you have no improvement on your testing. So that's kind of a murky situation. If you're not feeling any better at all, then I definitely would repeat testing at some point. The other thing is, just like SOT is expensive, every time you do these huge panels, they tend to get more and more expensive as well. So we got to find the right balance. So that is the end of my presentation. It was a pretty broad overview. I feel like there's going to be a lot of questions because there's so much good and bad information out there. So in conclusion, I think it's another tool in the toolbox. Is it the right tool for everybody? No, but nothing is. Is it possibly a good tool for you? Maybe, but I think you need to talk to your provider about that and kind of really look at the big picture. Thanks so much for your time tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. That was really so informative and educational. And same thought that it's another tool in the toolkit for Lyme patients. It's so important. We all know how much we have to advocate for ourselves and within that educate ourselves. So we really wanted folks to know what this therapy was and to have that kind of in-depth explanation that you just gave us. So thank you so much. I feel like I understand it now. I hope everyone else, I'd been hearing about it, but I didn't understand the specifics. So I hope everyone else feels the same. I'm sure they do. Bill, do you have any questions on your end? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was muted. Scanning for questions now. If anybody has any questions at all, please ask. We're checking Facebook and the QA.
Yeah, I don't see any on Facebook. I can start it off. I wanted to follow up something you said. I just wanted to make sure I heard you right, that all the treatments have to be done within that 6-month window. So let's say I get a test. I have to, if I'm going to get 3, they all have to be done from that date of that test. Did I understand that correctly?
So anything you order has to be within 6 months of that test. So let's say you had your test in January and it's June. We can order them off that same testing without repeating. And then once they hit our office, they're shelf stable for 6 months. So then you have a 6-month window to use all those up.
Okay.
But let's say, it's August now and you decide, you know what, I really do want to add on that babesia strain. Well, if your test was done in January, now we have to repeat all of your testing again.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's really good for patients to know timing wise, thinking about getting tested and sort of maybe thinking ahead already, like I may want to do this therapy. So I need to think about getting to that, into that process, as you said, right away, because it takes time coming to see you and ordering it and everything.
Yeah. And that's where you really need someone to walk this path with you and kind of say, okay, this is how much time we have. If you want to add something on, tell me by this date. Because it's a lot to keep track. So you should have a partner to help you with that instead of you trying to manage all that on your own.
Any questions for you, Bill? I have another question if there's nothing there.
Go ahead, Amy. Then I have a couple of questions of my own.
I thrilled to see, of course, the viral component on there. I'm always asking people, have you been tested for the viral component? We kind of forget that part of it. So I was curious. I know you said you don't necessarily have a lot of data thus far, but someone who is testing positive for some of those herpes viruses, they've got Epstein-Barr, and I heard you say that can be notoriously difficult to treat. I have that myself. And I sometimes think that is certainly that was a huge component for my fatigue. Do you see, we talked about herxing, do you see or can patients feel or see a difference when they're treating the viral versus the bacterial?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people do Epstein-Barr because it is so pesky. And if someone has a handle on getting Epstein-Barr under control, I'd love to hear it because I throw like 30 things at it right now. But it really has an impact on quality of life. And I think that's why people talk about it so much with the fatigue. For some people, it's just disabling. So I have seen some pretty good results with treating viruses. Again, that's one of the ones I'd say probably plan on doing at least 2 for Epstein-Barr. And then if you only end up needing 1 treatment for it, yay! And you just saved a lot of money. But I would probably go into it thinking I'd have to do at least 2. And then I would do a whole lot of other whole system support and still antiviral treatment on top of the SOT. Same thing with the Lyme and the co-infections. You can layer this on top of each other and do other things at the same time. I like to throw the kitchen sink at it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my question too with the viral, what your feeling was in terms of how many treatments. So thanks. Okay. Bill, anything?
Yeah, can you talk about the cost a little bit? Like what would an average Lyme patient be looking at to try something like this?
Yeah, so everybody kind of does their costs a little bit differently. Like I said, some people piecemeal them out. I don't know if you want me to quote my specific office or just I'll give you a general feel. For most offices, it seems to be somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000. If you're going to New York City, it's going to be a little bit higher. I think some places like Florida may be a little bit lower because they do so much volume. One of the big reasons why we started doing this is our patients were flying to Florida to get treatment, and we thought that was a lot to ask people to do. So we said, well, let's bring this to Pennsylvania. I'm not quite sure if there's anybody else in Central PA doing it, but price really kind of varies where you're at in the country, with the LA and New York City being a little higher, of course.
And that is 2 to 4 per dose or for the whole treatment?
Per dose.
Per dose, okay.
Yeah. So I can tell you our office, we wrap everything into one package, and then there's a discount for subsequent organisms.
Okay. Anything else, Bill? I don't see anything on Facebook.
I haven't seen anything come through. No.
All right. I think you were very thorough then. Everyone had all their questions answered. We'll give it another second here if anybody has any other questions for Cassandra. If not, we can certainly wrap it up for the evening. No, we're good.
I mean, do you do this treatment? A couple of questions. How long have you been doing this treatment?
So July will be 2 years since the first one was given at our office. I also do a little bit of cancer as well. And I'd say over 200 patients now. I think last year I ran the report the other day, it was like 150 calendar year. So it's definitely picking up.
And you normally do this in conjunction with other treatments at your office?
So that's my preference. I do have some patients who see other providers and just come to me for the SOT piece. And I feel like when we kind of piecemeal things, we lose a little bit in translation. I'm always happy to talk to another provider, but every provider does things a little bit differently. And then sometimes I see people for an SOT consult and their heart's set on SOT, and we talk, and it isn't the right treatment. They've never been on a biofilm disruptor, or they've only ever done one antibiotic at a time, or they've never looked at leaky gut, or their vitamin D level's 10. So sometimes there's some other things to do first. I never push SOT. Like I said, it's a tool in the toolbox, but it's a pricey tool. So what if there's some other things we can look at and just get your chances of success better, or maybe save you a couple of $1,000s and try something. But that's all us working together and patient driven.
Just so everybody knows, I popped the information for 𝗏𝗏 into the chat with the phone number there if you're interested. I did want to ask something. Again, I know that not a lot of data, but just those patients who feel they have had some success and they're feeling better in some ways. What are you able to see sort of an average time frame for them? Is it really, really different, just like Lyme and co-infections are in our bodies?
Yeah, I've had patients tell me, at that 6-week phone call, like 2 weeks in, I started feeling better. And I'm always like, really? That's fascinating and very, very exciting to me. I've talked to other people at 6 weeks and they're like, hey, lady, I just spent a ton of money and I got nothing. I'm like, okay, hang in there. So I'm more surprised when it's early. I'm less surprised when it's later on. I usually tell people, don't expect anything before I talk to you. Expect things a little bit later as you really start getting that burden, the number of organisms down.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we did have a couple of questions come in. I think you touched on this. What if you don't test positive? Like a lot of us with chronic Lyme, we never really do test positive with Western blot or what have you.
Yeah, so RGCC won't make anything without a clear CDC or alt criteria positive from that lab. So then I say, we can antibiotic challenge you. I can get you a heck of a massage, go run around my building. Let's try anything we can. Dr. Regina at our office has started doing a lot of that phage testing through red labs, and that seems to be picking up some people who haven't tested positive before. But some lab somewhere has to declare you a true positive in order for me to even get RGCC to make the treatment, which is a bummer because I know there's a lot of you out there that cannot test positive. Okay,
when you say alternate testing, like the IGeneX urine test or something like that, would that be an alternate test?
Yeah. So what I'm referring to is like MDL, Vibrant. Most of the big companies have CDC criteria and then alternate criteria that are a little bit different. So CDC or alternate criteria positive, specifically for Lyme. Most of the co-infections just come up with various bands. And I think they'll take a C6 peptide, but I would have to double check on that first. I feel like I asked them that once and it was a go. Like if you run a Vibrant, the only thing that comes up as a clear negative positive CDC or alternate criteria is Lyme. Everything else is just levels. I even hate to say these things out loud, but I haven't had a sample rejected yet. So, and that's part of the reason why they require positive testing is if I send your blood over without well, first of all, they won't take it, but every once in a while this happens. And like I said, I hate to say it out loud because it hasn't happened to us yet. Sometimes even when you send blood over with a positive test result, they can't find an organism. And then they still charge you a percentage for nothing. So that's why some people like to do the prime spot and then run the SOT off the prime spot because you don't run that risk. You only pay for the SOT if the prime spot's positive. But that's not my favorite test.
Okay, we have another question. It's about herxing. Is herxing a good thing or a bad thing? And I have my own opinions on that, but yeah, what is your opinion on that?
So I like it a little bit. I like when my people herx because then I feel like there's some type of sign that we're making progress before we can repeat test results. What I don't like is when my people are so sick they can't get out of bed for 2 weeks. Like that's not an acceptable level of herxing. So then we need to do something about that. I haven't had more than 1 or 2 people have a really, really, really bad herx. I think part of that's because I'm super cautious and I really push people to go slow and to really look at overall health before we kind of go in for this kill. I think I see people herx more with antibiotics and I've seen people herx pretty bad with supplements too, more so than I have seen with SOT.
Okay, and there was a second part to that question. How would this drug leave the body? Just through normal detox methods, bowel movements, urine?
None of the above. So because it's not actually a medication, it's not renally, it's not excreted through the liver or the kidneys. It's just messenger RNA. So it floats around your body, getting delivered to target cells. And then it gets inside your cells and there's nothing to excrete.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask if there was anything in it otherwise that one would have to be concerned with.
No, I would kind of think of it like catching a virus.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't really want to bring up the other messenger RNA. That's a hot topic right now.
Another question has come in. It's also about testing IgG positive versus IgM positive.
Yeah, so either one will work in terms of meeting requirements to make SOT. It's a little bit harder to interpret when I relook at labs after SOT, because every once in a while I'll see IgM convert to IgG, which makes sense. But sometimes you'll see a new IgM positive that wasn't there before. So did someone get a new infection, or is their body seeing something again that it's kind of recognizing it as new when it's not? Again, we're chasing antibodies, which are a little bit unreliable, but I love when the IgMs turn to IgG, because then I feel like it's more of a memory.
Great. All right.
Okay, I don't see any more questions in Zoom. Do you see anything in?
Let's see
Facebook?
anything on Facebook. I think we're good, and we're coming on the top of the hour anyway. So I think we've really hit it all. Again, we appreciate you coming to do this for us tonight. It's very informative. For those of you who will be around next month, our next Virtual Lyme is March 15th. It's the third Tuesday of the month. So March 15th at 7 o'clock. I believe the topic is TBD right now, but you can come to our Facebook page where we'll post the next speaker. You can find us at palyme.org. And Cassandra, is there an email or the best place for folks to come to you? Should they just use that the phone number or that website that I put in the chat box?
Yep, that's fine. We're also very active on Facebook and Messenger, so feel free to shoot a messenger. Those will go right to our CEO, Heather, and then she'll disseminate those. Our new patient coordinators are great at kind of fielding calls and getting things scheduled. You can also always shoot an email to like info@𝗦𝗢𝗃.com. Probably the easiest thing to do is to go to our website, because our spelling's a little tricky.
Yeah, it's TURNPAUGH, correct?
Correct.
𝗦𝗢𝗃 Health and Wellness, if you want to look for it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll potentially see you next month then.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.